Of course, then I know that when we are discussing things, he understands mashinani, you know, mashinani. Yes, so that is very good, Professor, and I'm privileged to be in this panel with you.
Thank you.
Yes, that's great. Unajua, they say vitu kwa ground ni different, and I'm happy I have panelists who are in touch with the matters kwa ground.
Yes.
So, gentlemen, let's get right to it, reflecting on the day's top stories. Let's begin on that particular note, perhaps starting with the front page of The Standard, where it's highlighted that 1 trillion shillings tax debt is at the heart of the KRA purge. More details have been covered on page 4 of The Standard right there, where intrigues in KRA purge as taxman seeks 1 trillion unpaid taxes. A lot has been mentioned when it comes to the collection of taxes right here in the country. And I'll start with you, Professor Ogola. Well, what do you make, first of all, of the changes that were instituted at KRA, a new Director General, including commissioners as well? But even as you react to that, what do you make of the tax waivers that seem to have been the order of the day in the previous administration, and President Ruto mentioning that wouldn't be the order of the day in this current administration?
Yeah, first of all, we have to look at it in two sides. If these ones were really things which were not deserving, the president and the KRA administration is right to go for that money. But the other question also we have to ask, is it real? Because this tax is not the first time we are talking about another thing. Because the first thing was the talks about the first family. There was some noise. It went quiet. We don't know how much money could be got from those taxes. We heard about the issue of the tax of the estate. That went quiet. We never saw numbers. If you saw any numbers that came up, then you can tell me. Then now we are going for this one. You know, is it justifying the changes they have done at KRA? Or actually there is this 1 trillion that will come by? If this money was refunded, and if it was refunded to somebody by KRA, is it legal that you can get this money back? Because I'm sure they followed a legal process, though even if they played with officers in the KRA, I don't know. But the point is that if they follow a legal process to give this money undeservingly, is it deserving to get it back? Because you see, for example, once you're given somebody some right, you don't withdraw the rights. You let them stay with their rights. So is this just noise, or this is the signal? Now, when you're listening to a radio, even now you're listening to television, there's always the noise on the background, but there's the signal. What exactly is being said? Is it excuses for replacing Uhuru's staff with his staff, that they are now trying to say there's 1 trillion that is begging? But for me, the tax question, also the third question, if I may raise before I give Professor time to comment. Jesse, the main question here is, we are talking about this government of Kenya Kwanza talking about how much money they want to collect. They are talking about the economic growth they are going to bring. But one question we are waiting for is, where is this money going? Because I can tell you for sure, the President William Ruto is collecting more taxes than Uhuru did collect. Secondly, he has borrowed more in his 6 months, more than Uhuru ever borrowed. He has done away with all the infrastructural projects. 19 of them are now pending. He has tried to cut the budget. But where is this money going? Because what we are seeing is that his budget in State House is going up. The one regarding Gachagua is going up. He is trying to employ cars, which is unnecessary according to me. So Kenyans are asking themselves, what is the reason for paying taxes, or even going after these people whom we are saying are defaulting on taxes, if they don't see the benefit? Like Professor has said, the real issue of the ground is serious. People can't go to school. You see, even Nisaba saying education is becoming hard. People can't go to school. Cost of fuel is up. Everything has gone up except income. Where is this money going? If you collect taxes, where are you taking taxes? And I just want to finish by talking about, there are two things, Jesse, to distinguish here. There's what you call economic growth. Economic growth is how much revenue the government can collect each and every year. You can collect more every year. That means there's growth. Economic development means, are you taking money to where it matters? Are you taking money to reduce cost of living? Are you taking money to ensure people can go to hospital affordably? Are you collecting money to increase literacy? Are you collecting money to increase primary, secondary, university transition? Because if guys can't see that happening, then that money is only yours. We don't know where you're taking it.
Interesting. And perhaps as you come in, Professor Elmi, it would be proper to note that President William Ruto's revenue mobilization plan, at least for the first 5 months in the current financial year, sort of fell short of the target, 32.2 billion shillings. That is the difference into the target and what was actually collected in the first 5 months by Kenya Revenue Authority. So do these changes actually, are they pragmatic from where you sit within KRA in order to boost revenue? And he raises a very important question when it comes to where exactly is this money going?
Rogers, thank you very much. I think there are two issues here, and it's good to segregate them. One is illegal tax evasion, that you are supposed to pay tax and you have not paid as required by law. And the second one is where does the money go? And the third one is that this is a new administration. And I think every new administration is entitled to work with people whom they think can do things according to their manifesto. So I think in the first instance where the tax evasion was done without considering the economic factors of the country. And the tax evasion is actually a criminal offense. If it was done without following the right procedure, and if Mama Mboga is able to pay tax, however small it is, then I think for fellows in the KRA, the leaders of the KRA, to exempt themselves is really criminal, in my opinion. Number two, I think we can give the benefit of doubt for this regime today, because 5 months, 6 months is not long enough. And I think, you know, they are still at an infantile stage.
Okay.
And at an infantile stage, you may stumble a lot, fall in one place, but ultimately you will walk and gain some strength. So I think this Ruto's government can be given that benefit today and say, okay, these guys are still young, where the money has gone. And you see today we're in a very serious economic problem. There's massive drought. There's massive hunger in this country. So if the rich and the well-placed people in the government cannot pay tax, that is shame. And I agree with what the President is saying. This country should not be an animal farm where some are more equal than others. And you see in the process, you see the hustler nation came in through the phenomena of assisting the local man. The man, the Mama Mboga, the Boda man, and you know those fellows who are at the bottom. And this bottom can only go up if there are sufficient resources. So collection of tax should only be an exemption where there is the economic benefit outweighs the collection of the. For example, if there is a merchant who is bringing massive employment to this country, or bringing massive technology or resources to this country, then an exemption for a period of time is allowed. And of course, I think there are structures.
Okay, of course.
Yeah, there are structures that deal with tax exemption. The problem in this country is we have not divisions of resources. There is massive resources. There are massive laws to follow. Everything is available. What is lacking is implementation. What is lacking is impunity.
What is lacking is impunity.
No, I mean, what is lacking is
accountability.
Accountability.
Okay.
That is, you get away with it.
Okay.
So somebody else steals it because, you know, Ogola has been allowed to steal. Then tomorrow it is Elmi. So the idea here, I think, tax collection is a very, very important. It will free us from this massive, you know, begging bowl syndrome, where every time you go to the West or any other country, this process can only end if we collect our tax well. And this tax must be used well, as the professor says.
And as you come in equally, we're talking about accountability, and there's so much talk in terms of making sure there's no wastage within Kenya Revenue Authority. You know, making sure that money collected indeed goes to the intended recipient, as you perhaps put it in a different way. Are we doing enough to seal these loopholes?
First of all, to start with that, KRA is not the one that spends money. Actually, KRA is an institution hired by the government to help me and you comply in tax payment. So it's just like, let's say, one of the parastatals under the government to deliver the mandate. Now, the money after that goes to the treasury. Now that's where after that, in that common pool, is where money is spent. So KRA does not have anything to do with how they spend their money. Actually, they do the right thing. Yeah. After that is when now money handed over to treasury, how now money is spent. So for sure, there are no clear way. For example, you see the president has been doing some things, creating some funds without appropriation from parliament. For example, the Hustler Fund. I went to court and challenged the president against it. I even went to court to stop the board that was already appointed from taking oath of office. The court agreed with me, and the judges cannot take oath of office because the fund for 50 billion Kenya shillings, already he has spent over 30 billion to people without appropriation. The budget controller cannot account for where is this money coming from and where is it going. So the institutions are not made. Now, to the other point that he mentioned before by saying, I disagree a little with the professor. I know professors can disagree because the so-called schools of thought are different. When he said that the president is having the right, the new government has got the right to replace the other people with their people. Just say, would you know what to live in a country whereby when there's a change of presidency, your job is not a threat? I would like us to move to a situation whereby institutions and functions are the main focus, not people. I would like to find a place whereby we have KRA that will do their work irrespective of who is the president. I remember when Trump, if you want to know Kenyans the value of institutions, Trump proved to Americans the value of having the strong institution they had. Okay. Because Trump didn't want to leave office. The military went and told him, we swear allegiance to the Constitution, not to the individual. So please leave office as soon as possible. We shall act when it comes. And that made Trump just take Air Force One and leave Washington. If we are having institutions, for example, KRA, we go to control our budget. We go to judiciary, independent institutions, which was meant, remember, most of the commission's name begin with the word independent, and they are not independent. They are institutions that can be manipulated. When institution will be strong, it will control individuals. When individuals control institution, what is the point? Because individuals, human beings left to their own, they can be very messy. They can do the wrong thing left, right, and center. Right. But with strong institutions, let us not do that. In fact, now, look at the replacement which has taken place. There are boards. For example, I have friends of mine from Mombasa crying. I was in the ICT board. I have been replaced without degazettement, even following the due process, Professor. We need to see these things happening whereby everybody feels protected, to feel Kenyan, that anybody changing on top there does not change my fate. And that's why you see people, immediately after the election, people are moving from this coalition to that coalition, going state house because it is individual. We are worshipping individual. Let us not worship individuals. But let us focus on the strong institutions. Okay, and Professor perhaps might buttress and mention that, we're talking about an appointing authority who doesn't need any reason or explanation to switch. It's within his powers, number one. Number two, he mentioned that you need someone who will implement your vision, whether it's a Kenya Kwanza manifesto, bottom-up economy. Don't you need to put people in these offices that believe in that dream? That's where my main thing is. Okay. If we are qualified, yes. Just look at. I have done analysis by looking at the number of years of the cabinet of President William Ruto, the number of years they have spent in school. It is almost half the number of years that was spent in school by Uhuru cabinet. Are we embracing meritocracy or not? You're a professor, you're in school. Look here. The most developed country in terms of human development index, where life is best, is Norway. The average number of years people spend in school is 17.5 years. In Kenya, we are doing 11.6. Now, it shows that there's a high correlation between the number of years spent in school and good life. In Kenya, if you take someone who was a professor in charge of education, then you take someone who is a question of whether they have masters or not to be in charge of education, is this a good replacement? We should be talking about progress, not retrogress. So I'm not questioning the qualification of those people, but you can go for yourself and check. Some of them had corruption cases. Then you're telling me they are going to turn around KRA. So what I'm trying to say here, Professor, if you analyze that thing objectively, you know, for me, the advantage is that I don't need appointment from this government. I am a professor. I'm satisfied with eating chalk. And the first thing that will help us Kenyans, it is to be satisfied with your job.
Right.
If I chose to become a professor of eating chalk, I should not look for another handout. So I'm trying to say clearly, my brother, let us strengthen institutions. Institutions will remove personality attack by discussing now Ruto, Raila. Do you know why every year you open the newspaper from since began independence is about a person? Either Raila is there, or Ruto is there, or Uhuru is there, or Kenyatta is there. Why are we not seeing headlines of institutions which are bringing governance and accountability? And then my last point before I finish, because again,
briefly,
the other thing I said, he said that the government is still new. They are 6 months into office. That is 10% of his presidency. They are still young. When will they grow old? Because the point is this year is going to end. By the time we reach August, we have already clicked 1 year, remaining 4 years. So let me tell you what. I agree with the fact that we can take time, give them time, isn't it? They asked for a 100 days plan. They have not executed that 100 days plan. I'm just following their manifesto. They made promises to that. And then telling us the economy is bad, he was deputy president. He knew how the economy was performing. If he didn't know, then there was a problem, which means Kenyans employed him as deputy president. He didn't deliver his mandate. I'm just questioning those things. And then lastly, there is always a stroke of genius of any new president. Kibaki had his stroke of genius. He was in a wheelchair, after he started to announce free primary education. And the economy turned on the head. Which genius decision have you had William Ruto make? Since he was sworn in, I've only had excuses. Mara, economy is dilapidated. Mara, my predecessor made a mistake. And just I can tell you, even Obama, when he became president, immediately there was global financial crisis. He came with what he called tech manufacturing. Trump, when the economy was bad, he came with bring jobs back to the US. That was a very clear statement. Which one have you heard from William Ruto? I want Professor to tell me which one are you waiting to work? Because as I watched football yesterday, when I saw this guy called Martinelli given a cross, his first touch showed me he was going to score. So which touch has William Ruto made that will show us he's scoring? But if he's making wrong touches, by blaming people, and if you become now, if you be made MD now of Standard Group, I'll tell you a strategy to survive. First of all, blame your predecessor by mismanaging Standard Group for the rest of the years. After 2 years, blame the economy. After the 3rd year, blame the staff. Then they renew your term. After that, now you can do what you want with the new term because that's your last term. If they fire you, they'll give you money for having given wrongful dismissal. So let us not have excuses. Just say the person dying of hunger is dying now. The person sleeping outside is sleeping now. The kid who can go to school who have wasted 1 year is not in school today. As we are giving you time, Mheshimiwa, I don't think that's fair.
Okay, interesting. And how do you comment before we introduce our other panelists, just briefly?
I think the professor is slightly emotional.
Is he not factual?
These are emotive issues.
But what we are discussing here is whether this removing these fellows for tax evasion is right or wrong. We are yet to come to the policies of, whether what has Ruto has done and what Kenya Kwanza government has done. All these things are things that we are going to discuss later. But the critical component here is these fellows have not been able to account for 1 trillion. 1 trillion is a lot of money, my brother. If this amount of 1 trillion Kenya shillings is given to the people of Northeastern today, I think hunger will be a thing of the past. So we are looking at, should they have collected this money? And if they haven't, then was it right for the government? The government is not necessarily the president. right to bring these fellows. Then the other thing is, we are not looking at, I mean, there's nothing that has shown that the procedure followed to remove these fellows was either illegal or unconstitutional. There's nothing that has come to the fore. That removing these fellows from the KRA, actually, I think it was in the paper of the other day, it said that they resigned voluntarily or something like that. So whether there was pressure or not, we don't know.
Yes.
What we know in a public domain is these guys left on their own volition.
But remember what happened with, what's his name, the former DCI Kinoti.
Yes.
We heard that he had resigned. Later on in an interview, the president mentioned that he indeed dropped the axe on the former DCI. So we might take this resignation
let's wait until the
with a
president
little bit of
says.
contempt.
Let's wait until the president says
Okay.
that actually this guy, he is the one who asked them.
Sure.
But for now, for what is in our domain as civilians outside and as Kenyan citizens, is that these fellows left on their own volition.
All right.
Number two, what is on the table is, was it right for them to have...
There's a word purge. KRA purge. That is not voluntary.
Okay, so whether it's voluntary or not, that's neither here nor there. Okay.
And the critical component is that this tax evasion is a criminal activity.
All right.
Whoever does it,
Yes.
whether it is the president, whether it is a simple man from Bolajogo in my village, and that our issue here in this country is that we want to be economically independent from donors, from all. In fact, we should be donors ourselves because the resources in this country is immense.
Okay.
So how this money will be used by this regime is something that we will have to question, all of us. We cannot give Ruto, a clean, a blank check to write whatever he wants. And I think there are certain institutions to guide all of them. If that institution fails, it's still 5 years.
All right, all right.
We can still remove him.
I like the word institution because he's talking about institution, again, individualizing. Because if there was a strong institution, we would trust him with the money.
But
interesting.
See, just let me add a little bit.
Allow me to introduce our panelists so you can equally join into the conversation.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, Gigi Kagombe, who is the Member of Parliament, Gatundu South. You've just walked in as we were having a deliberation on that particular headline that we can see on our screens right now, 1 trillion shilling tax debt at heart of KRA purge. And of course, it raises a couple of issues, and perhaps you will indulge us on your take on these other issues. When it comes to what the professor mentioned, meritocracy versus rewarding political loyalty. We've seen a couple of changes, not just in KRA, but equally in various state positions, including the CS position that many have been shortlisted, but only roughly, is it 24? Will actually get that position. What would you say about the process of hiring and firing by the Kenya Kwanza administration? Are they more into loyalty? Are they more into meritocracy? And to what cost?
There was a time when we were discussing whether members of parliament need to have a degree or not. And then we said, and the court ruled that you do not need a degree to hold such a seat. Why? Because we have something we call representation. And representation, the learned professor here, who happens to have gone to school like I have, may be well learned, but he may not represent a lot of us because we are not, all of us are not professors. And our issues, I cannot go and represent people from Northeastern because I don't understand the issues the way he does. The same way, a professor who comes from a minority of Kenyans cannot represent a lot of us because they don't understand the issues on the ground. Same thing. There's no law that is broken by appointing Mwaura to be chairman of KRA. If there is a law, we take it to court. This thing you're calling loyalty, that is a Kenyan who has been given responsibility to serve. But now professor comes and tells us, no, you cannot appoint him because he's a loyalist and he doesn't have a, he doesn't have a PhD like me. So please, what is qualification? The first qualification is to be a Kenyan, to deal with issues of Kenyan. So, and what is qualification? Having a PhD? We have seen fellows with PhDs who cannot run countries, all right? Who cannot run institutions. I mean, you're not telling me that everybody who has ruined this economy, because this economy has been ruined, that everybody has been, you know, not educated, from 4, liver, or those other people.
Okay.
Secondly, you cannot run a government by people who you cannot trust. Even right here, the first thing for you to be employed here, you must show some loyalty to this company. You cannot be employed by this company and you're working for the competition. So first of all, you must appoint people to positions. For you to work, you must appoint people that you trust, that you know, I will tell you, we go this direction, and they will help you execute your mandate. All right? So as for loyalty, loyalty cannot be taken to be just something. It is important in every organization, even where I come from, even in my office. I cannot leave. I am here. I'm not in the office, but there are people who are being served in my office. Are you telling me that I now come and say qualification is, I go to the university and ask for the most qualified person or the person with most degrees and then I employ them? No. The person in my office is not the person with the most degrees. It's the person that I know I can give instructions and they're going to execute. All right? Number 2, the person who left before Maura came in, because, you know, we're talking about KRA, is a person who's been in this government for very long, and even other governments, right? This purge that you're talking about, and you have used the RAD purge. I mean, I don't think it came from, it's not quoted, so this is a choice. This is a media house that has chosen that choice. And it is okay, because that is the work of the media house, right?
Yes.
This purge has been instigated by the previous regime. Because, I mean, this whole thing came as a result of what the previous regime did. If you ask a professor here, he will tell you that, you know, the person who sat on that seat was very qualified because he had been in government for many years. But we saw, you know, that this is public knowledge, that we had some transactions happening by people who do not deserve any tax evasion and tax breaks and tax holidays, and they're just given just because they can, because they have access. And we've been saying, you know, it is very easy to sit in opposition and just say things. And, you know, there's something we call the prerogative of the harlot, power without responsibility. And it is so easy for you to wear a suit and just come here and say, oh, you know, this government is not doing this, because nobody's going to ask you anything. When you say that, because I just had Professor here saying, and I look at Professor and wonder, now you, Prof, before you start castigating, you know, it is very easy to get a lesson from him about how to run a country, only for you to realize that even that chalk that he says he eats, he probably doesn't eat it properly. He doesn't even, you know, you find people in the streets telling you.
Let's not be personal here now.
No, it's not about Prof. No, it's not about Prof.
Okay.
Prof is my
Give him
friend.
time, give him time.
You know, there's someone who said that the problem with us is that you go to the streets and you find people talking about governance. And you find this person is by the roadside making tea. And now he's telling you, no, you know, this is not how to run a country, this is what you do, this is what you do. Only to run, only for you to realize that even they cannot make good tea.
But what do you make of a vibrant opposition? Isn't the
okay.
role of the opposition to hold those in government to account?
I just said, it is so easy to be in opposition. You know, you've been in opposition before.
That's totally fine.
And we've been in opposition before. I mean, and Prof will tell you, when we were coming to government and when we were coming to parliament, it was so easy. You just sit and castigate the people in power.
But you provide alternatives.
But you see, and that is what we've been saying, and that probably will take us to the next question of how we ended Parliament in the last session. And you know, I called for the suspension of the debate that we had because we did not have quorum, and we were discussing something very important. And we were talking about the changes that we may instigate, because we're saying even this opposition, while you oppose, our constitution seems to have a break somewhere, that opposition doesn't seem to be a legal entity, that it is not governed by any law, that just because you're in opposition, then you can just do anything you want, you know? You can decide to do maandamano, you can wake up today and say we are going to Jivanji, tomorrow we are going to Jacaranda, the other day we are going to stop all operations around IEBC and do prayers by the roadside, you know those things. You know, opposition also needs to operate to be anchored in law. From a position of law. And being in opposition does not give you the right to just do whatever you want or to say whatever you want. And you know, for every right, there's a limitation. Right?
True.
So even as you oppose the government, provide alternatives, but also act within the law.
You know it's right.
Yeah.
It's the right to picket. I just had to highlight that.
Yeah,
anyway,
so my
continue.
response is this. First of all, welcome, my brother, to the panel. At the same time, you are just falling prey to what I'm saying. Let's focus on institutions and functions, and we will not see individuals too much. Everybody needs to feel Kenyan and needs to feel that they are protected by institution, not by individual. Our life should not depend on William Ruto. So I'm sure, Mheshimiwa, you've gone to the West and the rest. Sometimes I was living in Spain, I was living in Europe. Election is taking place, I'm not even aware. Because it is depersonalized. There's a commission doing it. There's no much hullabaloo about it. In Kenya, if you have to become president, you even have to know, how will I be sworn in? In some countries, you just win the election and you will be told, now, take this one. You don't have to control things.
All right.
But I'm saying that is what I'm dreaming as a Kenyan, because I believe in institutions. Then when he talks about the issue of members of parliament representation, then he goes to technocrats. I think that's a false analogy, because as a technocrat, my work is not to represent the people of KRA. My work is to execute the mandate. It doesn't matter how much I come from, which part. The issue is that do I know the mandate of KRA and do I execute it? So we have to distinguish between loyalists and sycophancy, because sometimes we tend to take sycophants to be loyalists. I'm sure if you have your assistant in the office and there's something they need to give you as advice, and they cannot give the right advice, fire them even if they are loyal to you, because they're not giving you any service or value. Then I have to again go and tell him that let's look at three things which are important in this thing.
All right.
Just say, between qualification, experience, and performance, which one will you give more prominence? Obviously, performance is superior to experience, and experience is superior to qualification. And therefore, I am looking at all these things. The one who was removed before Hulu left office, I'm not here for the president. Me, I've never met him. We've never even talked. And at least you come from his constituency. This guy superseded the target from KRA. Is it not true? Now, we are saying KRA did not meet its target. So the person who made us supersede the target for KRA is being removed, and that is his last year, because last year he overmet his target. Now he's being removed for having overmet his target, being replaced with somebody else. So what I can say, let's wait and see at the end of the year whether the new person will actually deliver the target. That's the way to look at it. So I thrive on first performance, second, experience do you have, and thirdly, qualification, because we have so many people who are qualified that cannot do anything that is right. And then lastly, on the opposition thing, you know, you're a member of parliament, Mheshimiwa, but we have to be privy that even us who are a professor, you say I may not eat chalk properly. That is a situation my boss will evaluate. But when I go to the point here, is that the current constitution has not contemplated opposition. That's why we have minority and majority. When he says we are in government, he's a member of parliament. No. You are part of government as member of parliament, isn't it? Yeah. And in the member of parliament, there is no opposition. There is minority and majority. Because before, we are under pure presidential system. We are not under parliamentary system. Yeah. So in this matter, it's very clear that we have to know that Raila is not the leader of opposition. Actually, Raila is having a position that does not really exist by the constitution, isn't it? Maybe you can say he is a head of civil society, because